So this is a addendum, or maybe a pre-dendum, because I'm shooting this after I just shot the video that you're about to see. But this I want you to see beforehand, so you actually watch the addendum, or at least the ending of the addendum, because it's a personal story that's really funny, that has a lot to do with the movie I'm about to talk about. So if anything, just fast forward and watch the addendum. It's pretty hilarious. So I was super lucky to see Wes Anderson's very first film, Bottle Rocket, at the cinema, because I think only a handful of people did back in the day. But I was one of them, always been dear to my heart for a variety of reasons, which I'll get to after I talk about the introduction to this film, which I still think is one of the best ever. It's a really efficient and fun way of introducing characters and creating fate, putting them in this unusual situation. So to get us on board, Wes Anderson very cleverly opens with Luke and Owen Wilson, the brothers, at a mental hospital. Although we don't know it's a mental hospital yet, actually. It starts with Anthony, who is the patient, in his bedroom, and he's packing up his bag, and he's really kind of like a preppy surfer dude. He's got like long brown hair and like a red sweater, long sleeved red shirt on or something. And then he hears this cuckoo, cuckoo. It's like a bird cawing signal. And he looks out the window, and there's Dignan, which is Owen, his brother in real life. But there's Dignan across the courtyard of this mental hospital. Again, at this point, we don't know that it's a mental hospital. We just think it's like a college campus or something, and because it's very informal. But across the courtyard, behind a hedge, is this guy Dignan, and he's basically wearing kind of like a preppy white t-shirt, and he's got gloves on, like thieves wear, and he's holding binoculars, and he's got a mirror, and he's all kind of like excited and a little bit nervous and looking around like someone's watching him, but he's flashing this mirror up at Anthony on the second floor of this dormitory in the distance. And meanwhile, Anthony's looking down at him and goes, "Ah," and he waves at him, and Dignan gives him a big thumbs up and keeps looking around and looking through his binoculars and looking around. Meanwhile, Anthony goes back to his bed where he's been packing, and he has some bed sheets there. They're all tied up like in a long rope, and he ties them to the end of the bed, like the bedpost, and throws them out the window, like an escape rope. And just as he does that, somebody knocks on the door. So he walks over to the door, and he opens it, and it's like a middle-aged guy, and he's like, "Oh, hi, Dr. Nichols, I was just leaving." And the doctor, the psychiatrist, I guess, walks in and says, "Oh, Anthony, I just want to say goodbye to you." And then he looks over and he sees, this escape bedsheet rope hanging out the window. And so he goes, "What's that, Anthony?" And he walks over to look at it. And Anthony's like, "Well, my friend Dignan, he didn't understand this is a voluntary hospital." And he had this sort of elaborate escape plan. And I just didn't have the heart, to ruin it for him. So I got to do this, Dr. Nichols. And again, that's the first we realize, oh, he's in a institution, not in a dormitory. So Dr. Nichols looks at him and "Okay, Anthony," and he looks out the window at this bed sheet going down, and this guy way in the distance flashing a mirror at him, and he goes, "You got to make this quick though, Anthony. It doesn't look good." And Anthony's like, "Sure, no problem, Dr. Nichols. And by the way, you've been a great doctor." And Dr. Nichols is nodding. And then Anthony climbs out the window, and I think that we actually Wes Anderson cuts to a POV, point of view shot from Dignan, looking through his binoculars, and sees the bed sheet, and Anthony climbing out on the bed sheet. And as he does it, we hear Anthony saying, "Hey, Dr. Nichols, can you pass me my bag?" And the doctor actually gives him his bag. And so then he climbs down, it's literally 10 feet. So it's tick, 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 and he climbs down and hops down onto the grass. Beautiful sunny day. And as he runs through this yard, he's kind of skipping along. And again, there's this wonderful sort of happy music also, which started, has been going since the start, kind of like this whistling, goofy, happy music, which makes a big difference. Music always matters, especially, for presenting tone and mood. So it's sort of this happy music. And as he runs across the yard, there's several, mainly girls sitting on various, almost like picnic blankets. And they're like, "Hey, Anthony, see you later, Anthony. Bye-bye, Anthony." And he's sort of zigzagging as he says goodbye to them all, because he's escaping. And then he trots over to Dignan, who's again hiding behind the hedge still with his mirror and his gloves on and his binoculars. And, when he gets there, Dignan's like, great, you made it, great. And Anthony's like, yeah. And he goes, who's that up there? Was that the janitor? And he looks through the binoculars and he actually sees the bed sheets getting pulled up, by Dr. Nichols, of course. And Anthony's like, yeah, it was. And he's like, good job, you bribed him, huh? And Anthony's like, yeah. And Dignan looks up at Dr. Nichols in the distance in the window and does one of these, like a salute wave. And then you see Dr. Nichols kind of close up waving back. That's it. That's the introduction to Bottle Rocket. And again, it's just a really effective, efficient way of getting us on board. We want to be there. We want to see what happens to these guys because they're funny. It's like he's escaping from a voluntary institution. And, we know something's up after this. What kind of chaos is going to happen? It's going to be good-natured and fun and quirky, and that's all what Wes Anderson is about. But it's efficient, fun storytelling. It's certainly creating fate, and the choreography is fantastic, because we're right on board. We're getting some crucial information in a fun way. So like I was saying at the beginning, I was fortunate enough to see Bottle Rocket, Wes Anderson's first film, when it came out. And I was actually fortunate enough to work for a place called Carsey-Werner, which at the time was making some of the biggest television sitcoms, in the world. On the same lot where Friends and Seinfeld were actually being shot. They were making ones called Roseanne and Grace Under Fire and The Cosby Show. So they did okay at Carsey-Werner, and they decided to try to get into movies. So they had this project called Carsey-Werner Moving Pictures, and I was brought in to assist their new producer, this woman named Polly Platt. And Polly was known for, basically being the right hand of this guy James Brooks, who, aside from creating or being the producer of The Simpsons, which I assume everyone's heard of, also made a bunch of really great films like Broadcast News and other award-winning fiction films. So Polly was a renowned producer, and she came aboard to lead Carsey-Werner Moving Pictures, and I was her assistant. And her first thing she did was she brought in this guy, Luke Wilson, because he was going to possibly read for one of the scripts that she had. So I was in the office with her, 6 months after seeing Bottle Rocket, and in comes, again, Luke Wilson, Anthony from Bottle Rocket. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think he was shocked that I knew about the film because so few people had seen it, and I was like floored. It's like, dude, that was the greatest movie. And ironically, even one of the others, not his brother, not Owen, he never came there, but Bob, who's the other character, he came in a few times too, so I got to meet him. So for me, it was really special. And basically, Polly knew him because she produced Bottle Rocket. She actually discovered them at Sundance. So the backstory is basically that Luke and Owen Wilson were these two brothers who just happened to be friends with Wes Anderson, this fledgling filmmaker who'd done nothing up to that point. And they lived, I think, in Austin, Texas together in an apartment, the three of them. And they wrote and directed this little film called Bottle Rocket, like a 12-minute movie. And they submitted it to Sundance and actually got it in there for some sort of like short film competition. And Polly saw it, and she was like, yes. And she got a bunch of money together, not a ton of money for filmmaking, but enough that they were able to make it into a feature film. In fact, Luke and Owen weren't even supposed to be in the movie because they were not actors. They were just like friends of Wes. But they were so charming in this little short that they put them in the, in the feature version of it. And of course, the rest is history. But it was just funny that, I happened to be there at that time because I was floored by the little film, and then I got to meet these guys, and I got to meet Polly and work with her, which was funny too. And that's a story in itself. When I first met Polly, it was amazing because I'd also seen a great film by Peter Bogdanovich called The Last Picture Show, and especially Paper Moon. I love Paper Moon with Ryan and Tatum O'Neal. But The Last Picture Show starred Sybil Shepherd. And at the time, Carsey-Werner was making these huge sitcoms. One of their shows was called Sybil. And literally, Sybil Shepherd had her own hangar, one of these studio hangers right across the lot from where we were. So literally Polly's office, which I used to go sit in a lot with her, it looked right out at this huge hanger, and it said Sybil is the name of the show, you know, and which wouldn't have been a problem except for the fact that Polly was married to Peter Bogdanovich back in the 70s when he shot that film, Last Picture Show, starring Sybil Shepherd, and being a director and Sybil Shepherd being a starlet, well, put two and two together, guess what happened? And Polly was out of there and not happy about it. And so she was definitely not happy having to sit there every day and look at Sybil's frigging hanger. I just remember that. That was funny too. But yeah, it was fun working with those people. There's lots of stories about that. I could tell some more about that later. So please give me the hitchhiker's signal if you like this. And certainly any comments or questions you have about Bottle Rocket. So I totally forgot this other personal Bottle Rocket story that I got to make an addendum here for real quick. It's like 2 hours later, but I think it's a good one, so I'll just babble it out. When I moved here to Europe and I was teaching at film school, there was a semester like 10 years ago where we had a visiting producing teacher for like a month, and his name was Ned Dowd, super nice guy. And he showed up and he had this incredible resume. He actually produced Mel Gibson's movie called Apocalypto down somewhere in South America. I actually never saw it. It was a big production. And oh my God, the stories he would tell. I won't go there, but oh my gosh. And he made a bunch of money, I know, because he was a producer for that film, he told us. But he also was head of Caravan Pictures, which was production house, I think, on the old MGM lot, and actually produced a bunch of movies, including that movie, I think it's called True Stories, maybe. It's the one that David Byrne is in from the Talking Heads, and I'm a huge Talking Heads fan, so I was like, whoa, 6 degrees of separation there, Ned. Totally cool. But mainly, aside from all his incredible producing credits, he's also a part-time actor. And just for fun, he would do like these sort of like almost cameos or small roles. And it just happens to be that he was in 3 of my, what I used to call guilty pleasure films, these great little films that not that many people saw. The first of which was Slapshot. And he's from Boston, where I'm from. I didn't even know that, but he's from Boston. So he actually played hockey for this like minor league hockey team that the screenplay is based on. And the screenplay was actually written by his sister, Ned's sister. And starring Paul Newman. It was a big, huge, popular comedy back in the late 70s or something. And then after that, he was in another personal favorite of mine called Southern Comfort. This amazing kind of like Deliverance film, if you ever saw Deliverance, but it's about the National Guard going on a expedition down in the Louisiana bayou, and oh my God, the stuff that happens down there. But one of the bad guys, one of the Cajun guys who's messing with the National Guard is Ned. I just couldn't believe it because I see that movie so many times and loved it, and very few people have seen it. But Ned plays this kind of small role where he's a Cajun killer dude. Really amazing. And then lastly, which really floored me, is he was in Bottle Rocket. And guess which character he was? Dr. Nichols. It's a small throwaway role, but the first scene, which I was just talking about, first scene of Bottle Rocket, the psychologist, or psychiatrist rather, Dr. Nichols, is my old friend Ned Dowd. How about that? So there you go. The world is full of irony.